Sometimes to find true happiness, a person has to endure a long night. That's what our story today is about. Let's begin. It was quite difficult for me to endure my mother-in-law's negative attitude towards me from the very first days of my arrival in the family, but her sincere love for Leonid transcended personal grievances, and the young woman bore her difficult burden for the sake of their shared happiness. She understood that Tamara Timofeevna reproached her daughter-in-law for her inability to conceive and give Leonid the long-awaited heir or sweet daughter. But she could do nothing about it. Apparently, heaven had never resolved this issue positively. Lord wanted a different kind of wife for her beloved son. She was completely dissatisfied with the fact that Yana had grown up practically without a mother. The girl was raised by a father who had long ago stepped firmly on a cork, as they say about men who can't live a day without alcohol in any form, from hawthorn tincture to low-grade fruit wine. Shashibine would. It's not uncommon for a mature and independent man to continue living under the same roof with his aging mother because he can't escape her close influence. Leonid also found himself trapped by his filial love for his mother and continued to live with her in a small two-room apartment in the old part of the city. He spent most of his time at work. The lonely man hadn't interacted with women for many years for very compelling and purely personal reasons. While still in high school, Leonid began dating a classmate named Larissa. Soon, their youthful attraction gradually developed into their first and very strong love. At school parties, when the station was about to begin, all the classmates knew not to invite the attractive Larissa lest they separate the lovers. They remained inseparable even after graduation. They entered college together and studied in the same department, so they sat next to each other in the lecture hall. And after classes, they often strolled along the park paths until late in the evening. In their third year, Larissa and Leonid even planned to marry, having what was known as a student wedding, but the more flighty young woman accidentally met a rather wealthy man. Arkady Semyonovich was 2 decades older than Larissa and had already had the unfortunate experience of marrying early but soon divorced. The man worked in a canteen and restaurant, a position quite prestigious even for those times. He inspected public catering establishments, cafes, and restaurants in the city's central district. At every establishment, he was greeted as a long-awaited guest, fed free of charge. And when he left, the director personally handed him a large bag of delicacies, which always included a deeply hidden envelope filled with banknotes. Soon, he received a long-awaited invitation to a much more prestigious position in Moscow, where he went with his new partner. Larissa, without a trace of regret, left her young lover to grind away at his studies alone, while she herself went to the capital in search of a better life. Leonid took the betrayal and infidelity of his girlfriend very seriously. Things never progressed beyond passionate kisses in the secluded alleys of the city park, because his mother was constantly present in their two-room apartment, and Larissa also had a perpetually ill grandmother. After Larissa left, the young man paid virtually no attention to the opposite sex for the next few years, immersing himself entirely in his studies. He graduated from the institute 2 years later with honors, which allowed him to remain in his hometown rather than be assigned to explore new cities. A promising specialist was invited to a thriving economic company that urgently needed a deputy director for economic relations, especially since Leonid had completed his pre-employment internship there and demonstrated a strong grasp of his future profession. The salary was very good, allowing the young specialist rapidly rising through the ranks to easily secure a mortgage on a modern apartment in a new residential area of the city, where spacious apartments with improved layouts were being built. He soon successfully paid off the mortgage in full, but Leonid never moved into the yawn already furnished, because of his mother. Tamara Timofeevna had been a highly skilled actress all her life, successfully tormenting her husband, whom she kept under her thumb. And when he died in a car accident returning from yet another business trip, she transferred all her skills to her maturing son, Atuna. The elderly woman's favorite role is that of a victim of life circumstances. At the slightest sign of trouble, Tamara Timofeevna would go clutch her heart and start taking heart drops, insisting that being alone in a two-room apartment would be uncomfortable and very lonely. I won't even have anyone to call an ambulance, let alone bring me a glass of water. It's just a coincidence. Leonid believed these claims implicitly and continued to live with his mother. Even when he encountered Yana and an attractive nurse, a chance encounter he'd had when paramedics picked him up right from a meeting and took him to the Central City Hospital, where they successfully removed his and udin orikpujmedics. Yana was the first person the young man saw after waking up from general anesthesia. She had just graduated from medical school with honors, so she was assigned to the surgical department as a nurse on duty. Leonid was very taken with the modest girl. When she worked the night shift, he would come to her at the medical station after lights out and spend almost the entire night talking to Yana, telling her about his life. Soon a rapport developed between them, which quickly blossomed into a warmer one with a hint of mutual passion. Leonid learned that Yana had grown up without a mother, who had died when Yana was still in 5th grade. Her father, an ardent follower of Bacchus, was little involved in his growing daughter's life. They lived in a communal apartment, and a neighbor, a retired teacher, raised the girl. Thanks to the efforts of this compassionate, lonely woman, Yana excelled in her studies and learned the ropes of the difficult life she would soon face as a woman. After being discharged, Leonid and Yana began dating, and soon he brought his fiancée to meet Tamara Timofeevna, which the latter was not at all happy about, as this young woman could steal her precious son away to a new apartment. But the elderly woman played the role of a grief-stricken elderly mother, so the lovers vowed to live together, as they say, in comfort, but not out of comfort. They didn't have a lavish wedding celebration. They registered their marriage, then dined modestly and simply at a nearby cafe with Leonid's work colleagues. Tamara Timofeevna disliked Yana from the first moment they met, because she didn't want a wife like for her beloved son, as she repeatedly scolded him in the kitchen when his daughter-in-law left for night shifts. Why did you get involved with this ragamuffin who doesn't even know how to use cutlery properly? Did you consider heredity? After all, her father is a constant drinker. He even managed to gorge himself in this very kitchen and fell asleep at the table when he was invited to meet her before the wedding. I'm not exaggerating, Mom. I love Yana very much, and we will be together. If you don't like something, then we'll move to a new apartment and live separately and visit you occasionally. This option didn't suit the older woman at all, so she resigned herself to it. But she still remained rather cold toward Yana, and when, after a year of marriage, Yana still hadn't become pregnant, Tamara Timofeevna began accusing his young wife of infertility. Leonid spent his days working until late at night, and in the evenings he tried every means possible to reconcile his mother and wife, but he was never successful. Years passed, but the warm relationship between such different women never improved. Although Leonid put all his efforts into it, it was to no avail. As the saying goes, a stone met a stone. Their 5th wedding anniversary was approaching, but there was no progress toward having children, and the relationship between the spouses was no longer as passionate and warm as in the early years. Tamara Timofeevna continued her reproaches and tormented her daughter-in-law and son in turn. Yana, when she was resting after a night shift, and Leonid in the absence of his unloved daughter-in-law. To take a break from his everyday problems, Leonid decided to book a table at the city's finest restaurant for their 5th wedding anniversary and spend a few hours alone with his still beloved wife. He wanted to dance, not caring how his nagging mother would react, and to rekindle the former passion in their marriage. Why did Leonid decide to go after the restaurant to their new apartment, where he and Yana occasionally visited to maintain order? But Tamara Timofeevna had completely different plans for that evening, having accidentally learned that her son's first love, Larissa, had returned to town after experiencing a breakdown in her relationship with her aging husband. The elderly schemer somehow found out which restaurant Leonid had booked a table for two at for the evening and asked a friend of hers who lived in the same building as Larissa to arrange a meeting for them the day before the scheduled date. Tamara Timofeevna complained to Larissa that Leonid hadn't found happiness in his Mariana because he couldn't forget his first high school sweetheart. She had deliberately staged the whole thing to attract her son's former girlfriend. Larissa had separated from her husband because she could no longer tolerate the aging tyrant who was venting his anger over his declining masculinity on his young wife. But when Larissa learned that Leonid earned a good income and owned an apartment in a prestigious area of the city, fully furnished with modern furniture, she decided this was her chance. Now Lara intended to win back her former admirer by any means necessary. For the restaurant, Larissa wore her most revealing dress with a plunging neckline. Meanwhile, her slender legs were exposed to an indiscreet gaze, almost to the middle of her thighs. Her pretty face was covered in the capital's makeup, which always saved her in difficult times. The young woman was more skilled than any of her Moscow acquaintances when it came to seducing men, a sarri she repeatedly exploited when cuckolding her rapidly aging husband. My dears, let's take a quick break. It's very important to me to know which stories resonate most with you. Tell us in the comments what topics resonate most with you, what you enjoy hearing about most. Difficult family lives or unexpected twists in life. Also tell us what city you're from, and if this episode warmed your heart, leave a simple warm soul in the comments. Image. Your feedback helps our audio storytelling house grow. Now, back to our story. The most interesting part is ahead. When Larissa entered the restaurant with her smooth and graceful gait, many men's jaws dropped and a hunter's gleam lit their eyes. Leonid, however, nearly choked on his exquisite dish, immediately recognizing the sexy beauty as his youthful love. The young woman gracefully sat down near the table where Yana and Leonid were dining, then cast a languid glance around the room, deliberately ignoring her former lover. A waiter instantly materialized at her table and took her order with a bow. The restaurant quartet began playing a slow tune, encouraging the regulars to seize their chance to invite the beautiful stranger to Dan Lums. Leonid also invited Yana to dance, so he could watch the action unfold on the dance floor. But he was hesitant to meet Larissa's gaze, afraid he would be overwhelmed by the excitement that had overwhelmed him. Yana was oblivious to her surroundings, enjoying the relaxation in this unusual setting. The young woman was glad to escape the constant scrutiny of her mother-in-law, who always prevented her and her husband from spending time alone. After visiting the restaurant, Leonid and Yana's lives began to undergo some very negative changes, but at first neither of them suspected it. Leonid was shocked by his encounter with his first love. The last person he expected to see in the restaurant was Larissa. It should be noted that he was greatly impressed by the transformation in his classmate's appearance. Over the course of several years, the young woman had transformed into a captivating and sexy beauty with a haughty gaze and a stunning figure that was a torment to gaze upon. Her revealing outfit revealed her alluring curves and long legs, so there were plenty of suitors eager to cuddle her shapely body while they danced. Leonid danced calmly with Yana, but inside a fire raged. Why hadn't he kept Larissa by his side all those years ago? Although, what could a poor student offer a beauty? Now he has an excellent position, a high salary that allows him to support a family, 2 comfortable apartments, and he won't forget his mistress. Although Leonid hadn't even considered this before meeting Larissa. Larissa occasionally glanced languidly around the room and only watched Leonid and his wife during the dances. The young woman paid little attention to the numerous suitors desperately wanting to dance with her. She simply turned many down, citing fatigue. She considered how to meet Leonid discreetly without Yana noticing, and pass him a note with her phone number. Larissa was certain he would call, and then everything would depend on her wishes. The young predator decided to win her former lover away from his lawful wife. especially since Tamara Timofeevna had confided in her that Leonid wasn't particularly happy in his marriage. Larissa knew how to wait, and soon the opportunity presented itself. She noticed Leon's wife heading to the first floor to powder her nose. The way was clear, so she stood up and strolled leisurely across the room. Leonid noticed his former classmate approaching the table and, for the first time, met her gaze. A hot wave of desire ran down his spine, but he forced himself not to let it spill over. Well, hello, Leonid. How many years? How many winters? It's been a while since we've seen each other. You were the one who ran away from me with your older friend to the capital, and I, as you can see, wasted no time, worked hard, and managed to land a prestigious position. The salary is good, and I don't need anything. Here's my phone number. Call tomorrow. Since you have the day off, let's meet on neutral ground and talk like former classmates. I promise I won't infringe on your freedom, at least not at our first meeting. Larissa placed a folded note in front of the man and walked away proudly. Leonid immediately tucked it into his pocket and began to look out for Yana, who was already heading up to the hall. He immediately poured glasses of champagne and proposed a toast to their 5 years of marriage, although they had already toasted only that many times. Sunday was rainy, so Leonid and Yana didn't go to the city park as planned and boating on a lake in the rain isn't such a pleasant activity. Plans changed, so Leonid suggested to Yana, "You lie in bed a little longer and then start making breakfast. I'll put on my coat and go get some iced coffee. We'll drink your favorite coffee." Yana had to go to work on Monday for the first shift, so she agreed with her husband and decided to take another half-hour nap. The persistent ringing of the telephone woke her. She threw on a robe and went into the hallway where the telephone was. When she picked up the receiver, she heard Leonid's, "I'm urgently called into work. Someone lied, but I don't think it will last long. Have breakfast without me, and I'll try to be free by lunchtime. Then we'll have coffee and ice cream." There was no lie at work. Leonid simply decided to call Larissa and meet. It was raining outside, and it was unlikely that any of their acquaintances could see them. Larissa picked up the phone after the third ring. She already knew who was calling. In this city, no one except Leonid knew her mobile number. "I'm not feeling well, and the weather doesn't allow for a walk in the fresh air, so come to my place, so I'll send the address to the SMS. It's not far from the center." Leonid stopped by to pick up flowers and appeared at the apartment door half an hour later. As soon as he touched the doorbell, Larissa unpacked the doors and fell into his arms. She came up with such a cunning move so that Leonid would immediately feel her hot, naked body through the silk robe. Literally a few minutes later, they found themselves in her bedroom, and the young woman began passionately undressing the man, and he could not take his eyes off her. He let it up, cut the robe opened, revealing a luxurious and very seductive body. 3 hours flew by like a few minutes. Leonid got up from the luxurious bed. "Sorry, but I have to go home. I don't want Yana to worry about me disappearing for the whole day. I hope this isn't our last meeting, because we're so good together. Bye." "Why do you need that nurse? Look at me. Can my body compare to her angular figure? Divorce her and be with me, and I'll give you an heir or a sweet daughter. We dreamed about this, remember? And how do you know that Yana works as a nurse in the hospital? Tamara Timofeevna met with me the other day and told me about your life. It was she who told me which restaurant you would be celebrating at, and I put on my best dress and went to meet you. Now I understand that our meeting was not accidental. It was my mother who arranged it. But I'm not ready to change. My life had changed so abruptly," Leonid said, and left the apartment. Where else would you go? No one has ever been able to tear themselves away from my gorgeous body for long. And as for you, my dear classmate, I'll steal you away from your wife in at least 2 weeks, Larissa said languidly, stretching sweetly, deciding to get a couple more hours of sleep. Meanwhile, Leonid was rushing home in a taxi because the rain had picked up in Ortonosi, turning from a drizzle into a full-on downpour. He also needed to stop by for an iced coffee, as he promised to give Yana her favorite GCL's coffee. In the kitchen, Yana was busy with lunch, and Tamara Timofeevna watched from the window, thinking, "You won't be in charge of this apartment for much longer. Soon Larissa will steal your husband like a gypsy steals a stolen horse right from the building." Oh, I know women like that. In a month at most, my son will divorce you, or you leave home yourself." Leonid showed up just in time. Yana had just finished frying the cutlets, and the fragrant borscht was already steeping on the stove. "I'm all set. I'll wash my hands and let's sit down to lunch." "What happened at work?" "Oh, nothing special. But we had to discuss it for a few hours. Our foreign partner called and offered a tempting option, but the boss is hesitant. Well, he has 30 days left until retirement. He's hesitant to make a decision. Yes, I bought ice cream, so we'll make coffee for dessert. And as a bonus, they gave me your favorite Prague cake. I prefer bird's milk and Malvara." The mother-in-law chimed in. "Mom, there's no need to argue. Everyone has their own taste." Peace and quiet had settled in the family lately. Tamara Timofeevna didn't pester Yan with her complaints. They didn't see each other often, though, because one of the nurses had gone on maternity leave and he had to work part-time. This suited Leonid. He could see Larissa unhindered. While Yana was out. And when she went on the night shift from 8 p.m. until noon, he'd spent the night at Larissa's house or in the empty apartment, where Larissa had already created a very cozy nest. Yana was so tired that she practically didn't notice anything was wrong with the family. Leonid began staying late at work more often and stopped showing her any attention. He'd go to bed and fall asleep right away. The woman thought it was because of his stressful work. Her husband once told her that the company's management had decided to nominate him for the position of Director of Economic Relations because Nikolai Pavlovich was soon. So he was already working the equivalent of 2 people and staying late until his scheduled deadline. It was a good thing they now shared their personal transportation. The driver would take the director home at 6 a.m. and then return to wait for Leonid. He wasn't telling his wife the whole truth. In fact, they would leave work together, and Leonid would get out of their car a block away from the new buildings, explaining that they needed to periodically check the apartment because only a few floors in the building were occupied while most of it was empty. A few minutes later, he would meet Larissa and they would head to the apartment, not to check its integrity, but to spend a few rather wild hours in bed. But one day, when Yana returned from her day shift around 9 p.m., she found her husband missing, even though he should have been home by now. Well, probably too much work again, she thought, and soon fell asleep, exhausted. She woke to find Leonid talking to his mother in the kitchen. She was surprised to see they had closed the door tightly, something they'd never done before. After checking the bed, she realized her husband hadn't gone to bed. She didn't know where he'd been all night. Perhaps he decided to spend the night at his new apartment. Yana began to remember that Tamara Timofeevna had stopped making trouble recently, instead looking at her with a condescending, unkind smirk. She began to suspect something negative was going on behind her back, so she decided to get to the bottom of it without putting it off. One day, on her day off, Yana cooked a delicious dinner, but her husband was in no hurry to get home from work. For some reason, he didn't answer his calls. His cell phone must have died. She never called the company landline because Leonid did, against it disturbing him from work. After 11 p.m., Yana decided to go to her husband's office. She called a taxi and was soon at the entrance to the company building. But the security guard informed her that all the employees had long since gone home and all the offices were closed. A short pause, friends. If this story resonates with you, I'd be very grateful for your like. For us, this is the best sign that we're on the same wavelength. And subscribing to our channel is the very key that will always open the door to new encounters in our home of audio stories IT. Please tell us where you listen to us from, what city or country. Your comments and the warmth of your hearts are our inspiration, which gives meaning to each new episode. Thank you for staying with us. Let's continue. Then the young woman decided to move to the new apartment because her husband sometimes slept there when he worked late. But he always called to let her know he wouldn't be coming. They sometimes spent time there together when they wanted some alone time and a break from the constant lectures of their compassionate mother, who often pestered them with her complaints. When she pulled up to the entrance, she noticed the lights were on in the kitchen and living room. So, with a sigh of relief, Yana sent the taxi away, went into the nearest store, and bought something to eat, knowing the refrigerator in the kitchen was empty and unplugged. Imagine her surprise when, upon ringing the doorbell, she heard her husband's voice. It must be the pizza delivery guy. Pay up. The money is on the table. The apartment door swung open, and Yana's legs almost gave way. A young woman with a saxophone voice stood before her, wearing only her husband's shirt. In that one was only buttoned a couple of buttons. She smiled slyly and looked at her rival with a victorious air. Soon Leonid appeared, wearing only trousers. He must have come out of the bathroom because he was barefoot. Yana handed him the bag of groceries, then silently turned and walked to the elevator. She didn't remember how she got home. Her mother-in-law's voice brought her back to reality. Now you understand what's going on. My son has finally met a woman who can bear him children. He's loved Larissa for a long time, since school, and you have no place in our house. Yana didn't argue. She silently packed her things into a suitcase, called a taxi, and left for her father's. Literally the next day, Leonid filed for divorce. They had no children, so an annulment was not expected. Larissa insisted that they live separately in a new and comfortable apartment. Tamara Timofeevna didn't argue with the young couple because she was glad the hated nurse would be gone forever. Her father greeted his daughter rather coldly, declaring it was all her fault because Miata husbands never cheat on a normal wife. However, he didn't stop Yana from living in his apartment. Someone had to clean up the mess. Only Yana calmed down a bit after Leonid's betrayal. During this time, she only met her ex-husband once, at the Legislative Assembly when they were finalizing the divorce. He hadn't had the sense to show up alone without his new partner. Then misfortunes rained down on her like water from a cornucopia. First, her father became seriously ill. He even had to be hospitalized, where they treated alcoholics after yet another binge. His excessive drinking had taken its toll, leading to intoxication. Luckily, a friend of hers, with whom she had studied at medical school, worked as a nurse at the hospital. So there were no problems getting her father into a general ward, even though space was quite limited. Now, after her day shift and before her night shift, Yana drove to the outskirts of the city where, in a park area, there was a closed hospital where only close relatives were allowed, and even then, not all patients were allowed. Valentina assured her friend that Nikonor Yakovlevich was already recovering and would be discharged home in a couple of weeks. He was given 3 IVs every day to thoroughly flush out all the nasty stuff from his system, as well as glucose and special medications to neutralize alcohol intoxication. Misfortunes never come alone. 7 days before her father's discharge from the hospital, Yana began having problems at work. A new head of medical staff had been appointed, Mad. Naturally, he began firing nurses at any opportunity to make room for his own Dorievo game in an untrusted staff. A young woman found herself under the thumb of a new broom, sweeping out all undesirables from the hospital. Yana was a very diligent nurse, but that didn't save her. Her new partner simply let her down. When she started her night shift with her the next morning, it was discovered that a couple of vials of a narcotic medication administered only to patients in extreme pain had gone missing. The head of the department wouldn't let the night shift go until security checked their personal belongings and the lockers where the staff changed clothes. Naturally, the ill-fated vials were found in Yana's locker. The woman tried to justify herself by claiming she didn't know how she got them, but management asked her to resign voluntarily to keep the matter quiet. Yana agreed, but couldn't resist the pleasure of openly telling the head of medical staff everything she thought about his structuring and unfair dismissals. After such a revelation, she would hardly have been able to find a job as a nurse in the city's medical institutions. But the young woman didn't regret what she had said, even though she knew she couldn't stay in the city any longer. After waiting for her father to be discharged, she told him everything she thought about his life, declaring that she was fed up with it all. Her constantly drinking father, lack of work, and lack of stability in her life had already fed her up. So she was leaving for the village and would settle into the house where her mother and grandmother had once lived. Yana made her way to the village with several transfers because there was no direct bus that day, and she didn't want us there in the city for another day. She urgently needed a change of scenery to get her thoughts in order and to start. Disappointment awaited her there. The old house had stood empty for years and was utterly decrepit. Living there was dangerous. The rotten rafters were at risk of giving way, and the roof could upset any moment. Yana sat down on the porch and burst into tears of despair. She had no idea where to go or where to live. And who was crying so bitterly here? What happened? Did someone offend you, dear stranger? I heard her voice. Raising her tear-stained face, she saw a rather sweet old woman who had stopped next to her and was looking at her with concern. Oh, I see you're not from around here. What brought you to our God-forsaken village? Yana felt trust in the stranger and sincerely told her everything that was boiling in her heart. She ended her not-so-long story with the words, "And what should I do now and where to go, I don't know. The last refuge where my mother and grandmother lived is falling apart, and it's impossible to live here." Oh, so you're Pelagie's granddaughter? Your grandmother and I were friends because we lived next door. Remember your mother? But she passed away early. And her husband, Nicanor Yakovlevich, continues to drink heavily. Heavily. Since Veronica died. He hasn't sobered up. Rumor has reached us too. Don't worry, girl. You'll live with me. There's plenty of room. And I won't be so bored either. Loneliness is already getting to me. Yana found a new home in Nadezhda Vasilievna's house. She helped with the simple housework. In the morning, she'd feed the chickens and rabbits which bred with enviable regularity, so they didn't have fresh dietary meat. As a professional nurse, the young woman closely monitored the good-natured woman's health. After all, years only add to the burden of various illnesses. However, fresh air and organic food help the body age much more slowly than in the city. Nadezhda Vasilievna's garden was small but well-tended. It grew all the necessary vegetables, from carrots to potatoes, and behind the house was a small orchard where plums, apples, and pears grew. In a heartfelt conversation, a lonely old woman told Yana that her only son lived in the far north, where he'd settled several years ago, after falling out with his mother and leaving to earn money, taking his wife with him. Nadezhda Vasilievna blamed only herself for their separation. The truth is, Vitaly was a late child. She'd given birth to him at 40 and loved him so much that she'd become jealous of his fiancée. Many years ago, she'd intruded into his family with her recommendations, and Vitaly couldn't forgive her. He packed up and left, first to his wife's homeland in Siberia, and then even further north. Only once did he write that Nadezhda Vasilievna had become a grandmother and had a granddaughter. But pride and resentment prevented him from responding, congratulating his son and making peace. So she lives alone. Within the first year of her life in the village, Yana had fully adapted. She was used to getting up with the roosters and going to bed early in the evening. The only thing that bothered her was the lack of work in her field. The village only had a small medical center with a doctor and a paramedic, but they promised to soon complete the construction of a small outpatient clinic which had been underway for several years. They would also need an experienced nurse. Due to a lack of funding, construction was temporarily frozen, but authorities soon promised to resume. By a lucky chance, Yakana managed to get a job at a local store because the saleswoman Lyudmila was going on maternity leave and was looking for a suitable replacement. She quickly settled into her new job, especially since there weren't many customers, and a food truck arrived twice a week. The driver, Dmitry, who also worked as a delivery man, usually delivered fresh bread and a selection of basic groceries, mostly groceries, mawa, The locals immediately snapped up the sugar, cereals, flour, and pasta. Yana quickly learned which products were most in demand among the locals and began ordering them specifically to keep the shelves stocked. Residents of the neighboring village often came to the store, as theirs had been closed for a year and there was no one to work. Consequently, Yana's business was quite brisk and her numerous customers were happy to have everything they urgently needed, tunans at once. The young woman also managed the household chores, which greatly helped Nadezhda Vasilievna, whose health was deteriorating, and by winter the old woman had become bedridden and was practically unable to get up. Vera Nikolaevna, the village doctor, examined her and wrote out prescriptions. She didn't prescribe medications because she knew Yana had worked for several years in the city hospital and would be able to figure everything out on her own. Nadezhda Vasilievna was deeply worried about what would happen to Yana if something irreparable happened, and she was left alone in the large house. The old woman felt she would hardly live to see spring. She especially regretted that she had never seen her son, whom she missed so much. Yana found the only letter from Vitaly and, without Nadezhda Vasilievna knowing, wrote to him. I briefly told him that my mother has been seriously ill for several weeks. There are medications, but they only support the body, so it would be necessary to come and support my mother in difficult times. At the end of the letter, the woman indicated the number of her mobile phone, which she had kept after her divorce from her husband. She practically never used it, although surprisingly there was a connection in the village. She only called the doctor a couple of times. Literally a few days later, her phone came to life, and she heard an unfamiliar voice. After a few phrases, Yana realized that it was Vitaly calling. So she handed the phone to Nadezhda Filievna, who was feeling a little better that day. The old woman was very surprised that she could easily talk to her son, who was 1,000 kilometers from the village, on such a small device. Yana left the bedroom so as not to disturb her relative's heartfelt conversation. A few minutes later, Nadezhda Vasilievna called. She handed the device to Yana. The young woman heard a distant voice. Unfortunately, I won't be able to fly right away. We're having snows and bad weather here. But as soon as the planes can take off, I'll be there. I've already booked the tickets, but I still need to get to the airport. There are huge snowdrifts on the roads. Please try to do everything possible. I've been doing this for the last few weeks, but your mother is very weak. Today, however, she feels somewhat better, but that doesn't mean the illness has receded. A relapse is expected, and no one can guarantee improvement, so hurry. No matter how hard Yana looked after Nadezhda Vasilievna, it seems the heavens have decided that her earthly life has come to an end. The old woman died just 2 days before the old New Year. Local doctor Veronika Pavlovna determined the cause of death to be an old illness. She issued a death certificate and left Yana to prepare the deceased for a speedy burial. The women of the neighborhood, who knew all the details of how to properly prepare a body for burial, asked Yana not to interfere. So she went to the store where a sizable line of customers had already formed. When everyone had finished their purchases, Yana decided to close up shop. But at that moment, the village elder, Nikodim Petrovich, and the local police officer walked in and asked her to review some documents. The fact was that Nadezhda Vasilievna, sensing that she would not be able to overcome her illness, had secretly invited the local police officer and the village elder while Yana was at work to draw up a will in their presence. According to the official document signed by Yana, Nikanorovna became the heir to the house and the garden plot. You, my daughter, will come into your inheritance in 6 months, the village elder said, but you can live in the house peacefully. The holding Estawas will say a word against you. We saw how you looked after Nadezhda and helped with the housework, so live peacefully. I think the deceased son won't mind, since he left many years ago and has never appeared again. There was no priest in the village, so the local old women themselves performed the funeral service for the deceased all night. Dear friends, we will continue very soon, very soon. We really need your support so that our cozy home of audio stories can grow and develop. Please like and subscribe. This is a huge incentive for us to move forward. Please share your opinion in the comments. How did you like this story? Rate it from 1 to 10. Your honest feedback is incredibly important to us. We thank each of you from the bottom of our hearts for your warmth, attention, and for staying with us. Yana was able to stay until midnight, but then excused herself and went to her room to sleep until dawn, as she had a busy day ahead. In addition to organizing the funeral which the village headman had promised to help with, he had already arranged for the ground in the cemetery to be thawed overnight so he could dig the grave by hand. There was no equipment in the village, but men capable of the job were found. Yana had given them several bottles of vodka and snacks at the store so they could work in the freezing cold at night. The headman assured them he would cover all expenses, as was customary in their village. Just an hour before the funeral procession was about to take Nadezhda Vasilievna on her final journey from her home to the cemetery, a taxi pulled up. Fili had finally made it to the funeral, though he had fervently hoped to find his mother alive. It was a long journey from where he lived, so no one in the village could blame him. They themselves had never ventured further than the district town, and even then they considered it a long journey. The entire village gathered for the funeral service, but no one came empty-handed. Tables were set in the old community center, which, by order of the village head, had been heated the previous night, tidied up, and everyone who had come to pay their respects to Nadezhda Vasilievna sat comfortably at the old oak tables. Vitaly hadn't arrived empty-handed. He'd brought northern delicacies, but they were intended for his mother and Yana, so they weren't served to the group. There was plenty to snack on anyway. Yana did bring a 5-liter plastic container of sauerkraut with large cranberries added according to a northern recipe, and Vitaly took out from his large travel bag some meat products he'd bought in town. Such delicacies weren't available in the village. He immediately bought a case of vodka from Yana's store and set it out on the tables so the villagers could properly honor Nadezhda Vasilievna. The young man lamented that he hadn't found his mother alive and hadn't been able to ask for forgiveness, that he hadn't written enough and hadn't forgiven her for the long-ago disagreement. Immediately after the burial, everyone gathered for the wake. As per tradition, there was a hearty borscht prepared by two kumushki, common folk, living near the club, as well as mashed potatoes and cutlets. And Salanti, the best fisherman in the village, managed to catch a fish and fried it according to his grandfather's old method with a golden crust. The village headman, Nikom Petrovich, spoke first. We all knew Nadezhda Vasilievna well, but many remembered that kind old woman, still comparatively young. Sadly, her generation is passing away, but such is life. One thing I regret is that we have so few young people. We will leave, and those who remain in the village will. Well, let's remember the departed with kind words. Then everyone who wanted to said kind words and recalled how kind and Nadezhda Vasilievna was to everyone in the village, sometimes even helping as much as she could. Yana was also given the floor, but she couldn't speak because bitter tears were streaming from her eyes. Vitaly spoke in her stead. My mother was sometimes stern but fair, so she went and welcomed a complete stranger. I didn't even leave the house in my will. Frankly, I don't lay claim to this property, because I have my own house in the north with all the necessary amenities for comfortable living. One thing I regret is that we parted on bad terms. She never got to see her granddaughter. And then, due to bad weather, I didn't find my mother alive. We stayed until late in the evening. No one was in a hurry to go home, as such heartfelt gatherings were rare for villagers. Besides, the next day was the old New Year's celebration. This date was celebrated religiously in the village. Even such a sad event couldn't break the ancient tradition. Only Vitaly and Yana didn't participate, as they strictly observed the mourning period, and there was no festivity in the house for 9 days. All this time the young people chatted heartily, reminiscing about Nadezhda Vasilievna. Yana said they had a good life together. If she hadn't met that kind old woman, who knows how her future life would have turned out. He rarely went to the store only when customers from another village arrived. But after quickly filling the empty bags, she hurried home, enjoying the company of Vitaly. The young man had taken a liking to the attractive woman. He even helped unload the truck when the driver delivered a truckload of various groceries, fulfilling Yana's order. In the evenings, they sat by the stove and had heartfelt conversations. Without realizing it, Yana had told Vitaly her whole life story. She particularly lamented how she couldn't live with her alcoholic father, which was why she'd left for the countryside. The young man also spoke frankly about his own problems, of which he'd accumulated a ton. It turned out that just a couple of years after their daughter was born, his wife couldn't stand the harsh life in the far north, filed for divorce, and a month later flew to the mainland where she met a foreigner and left for the country forever. She left their daughter, Yulia, with Vitaly without considering how a lonely man constantly lost on a drilling rig would raise a little girl. However, she wasn't interested in that. She had completely different plans. Vitaly realized too late that his mother was right when she said he wouldn't find happiness with this woman. But he didn't have the courage to write and confess everything. He was forced to send Yulia to a boarding school. Fortunately, the neighbor worked there and cared for the girl as if she were her own. Unfortunately, she and her husband had no children, so she devoted all her unspent maternal love to someone else's child. Only on rare weekends did Vi take Yulia home and spend hours with her so that the child could feel his father's love. Thanks to the active support of Svetlana, who happily agreed to look after the girl while Vitaly flew to the mainland, the man had no worries knowing his beloved daughter was in good hands. Vitaly warned Yana that he would leave immediately after 9 days from the day of his mother's death because he had only been given 2 weeks and it would take him almost 3 days to get to the village of Burovikov, UKF. In that short time, the young people developed a liking for each other. They were very happy together, and both repeatedly declared that they didn't want to separate. They celebrated the 9-day anniversary there at the old club. Vitaly asked to speak first. Dear fellow villagers, I thank everyone for their kind words about my mother. Unfortunately, I must leave tomorrow. It's a long journey, and my daughter awaits me there, and I miss her very much. I ask you to help Yana, because I've decided to return to my family home for good after a while. And if she's okay with it, I'll start a new, strong family with her. Oh, that's the right decision. I'll answer to you about your rights as headman, Vitaly said Nicodim Petrovich. You were born before our eyes, and as the saying goes, where you were born, there you'll find a use. We'll help you find a job. Yana and Vitaly spent the night together, and in the morning he called a taxi from the city and left. But he swore he'd definitely return and that he'd settle all his work issues for good. I left some money on the table. What if I don't make it back for 40 days, so you can properly set the tables and treat everyone who comes with respect? Don't argue. I've decided so, and there's no other option in sight. Get used to listening to your future husband. Time flies inexorably. It's been 6 months since Vitaly left, but he's only called once to say he'd arrived safely and would write about the rest. But the letter never arrived. Or maybe it got lost somewhere along the way. Yana inherited the property and became the full-fledged mistress of the house. Her day began as usual. She had to feed the chickens and rabbits and then go open the store. Construction workers had arrived to build a clinic and they needed something to eat, so her customers noticeably increased. Yana immediately surveyed the new residents about what products they would like to see on the counter, then wrote it all down on a piece of paper and gave it to Dmitri, instructing him to buy only fresh produce. One day, Tamara Timofeevna dropped by the store unexpectedly. Yana never expected to see her there. She was just about to go home for lunch, so she closed the store and suggested they talk to her ex-mother-in-law on the way home. Bum, I won't invite you inside. We'll talk outside. How did you find me? Nikanor Yakovlevich gave me the address. He refused to tell me until I bought him a bottle of port. And when I arrived by bus, the locals told me you were in the store. So why did you come all this way? Would you like to find out how I'm settling in at my new place? I'm doing well. I'm still working at the store. The new clinic will be open by the end of the summer, and I'll transfer there to work in my profession. I'm in trouble. Leonia has fallen completely under the influence of Larissa, who only cares about restaurants and casinos and casinos. My son has become addicted to gambling and has gotten into huge debt. He lost his prestigious job even though he was already acting as the director of economic relations and had great prospects for career advancement. Now he and Larissa are living with me. She's unemployed. And Leonia has put her new apartment up for sale. I beg you, I can even get down on my knees. Come, save my son from this woman who will ruin him completely. Tamara Timofeevna, you once said there was no place for me in your family, and I have no intention of saving the man who betrayed me. You and he deserve what's happening to you now. There's no room in my heart for you or your son. Completely different people have taken up residence there now. People I'm expecting any day now. So go your own way. You'll still make the bus that leaves in half an hour. Yena entered the house and closed the doors tightly, leaving her ex-mother-in-law no chance of getting involved in her problems. She didn't regret this action at all, because she couldn't forgive Tamara Timofeevna for her abusive attitude toward her, and she had long ago completely erased her son from her life. After this unexpected encounter, Yana finally realized she had found her long-awaited love in a Vitali, for whom she was willing to wait as long as it took because she couldn't imagine her life without him. Thanks to funding from above, the builders completed the new outpatient clinic on schedule as promised. Veronika Pavlovna personally invited Yana to the new job because paramedic Yuri remained the sole owner of the medical center and the doctor needed a professional nurse. Come in. Lyudmila too decided to return to work because she lived across the street from this and could always keep an eye on her son without affecting her work. New residents began to appear in the village. There were plenty of vacant to well-maintained houses, and Nikodim Petrovich was incredibly happy that young people had finally arrived. The village head had already arranged with the district administration to build a small utility center in the village, as transporting appliances to the city for repairs was inconvenient and expensive. The club also needed to be repaired and used for its intended purpose, showing movies twice a week and holding dances on weekends and holidays. Work at the outpatient clinic increased as many residents of the neighboring village, which didn't even have a first aid post or medical attention, so Yana stayed at work almost until evening. Autumn had arrived. Cold and flu season was beginning. The rains cleared the way, bringing slush and a chilly dampness. One evening, Yana stopped at the store for fresh bread. Lyudmila always left her loaves and black bread. They talked a while, and then the woman hurried home, tired and eager to light the stove and cook something hot for dinner. She noticed vague shadows on a bench under the awning near the porch. Only when she got very close did Jan realize it was Vitali and a little girl. Why didn't they come inside? They should have lit the stove. They would have been freezing outside. Or have you forgotten where the key is? Honestly, I didn't know that. Well, hello, my love. This is my daughter, Yulia. We've come to visit, not just visit. Will you welcome us? Yana smiled back, beaming with happiness. After lighting the stove and preparing a hot dinner, Yana invited Vitali and Yulia to the table. When the guests had eaten, she went to put the girl to bed as the child was already closing her eyes from exhaustion. Then they sat down in their favorite spot by the stove and began to quietly talk. It turned out that Vitali's bosses wouldn't let him go because the contracts he had previously signed couldn't be terminated without financial losses and only through the courts. That's why I was so late and didn't call, because I was sent to the farthest drilling rig until the end of my contract where there was no mobile coverage yet. The helicopter only flew to us once a month. It's good that Svetlana was looking after Yulia, so I was calm about my daughter. But I was very worried that I couldn't tell you about the forced delay. I returned in September, but we started having heavy snowfalls. I had already prepared the house for sale. All that remained was to wait for the new tenants who were delayed due to bad weather. I thought that unforeseen circumstances prevented you from warning me in time. Yes, life there is completely different from here. And when we arrived in Moscow, we were delayed for 2 days. I wanted to show my daughter the capital. When else could we go there? Yana, although a little upset with Vitaly, was very happy that her beloved had returned and now they would have a real family. Quickly a trusting relationship had been established. The girl greatly missed her mother's affection and Yana gave her all her unspent love. A week after his arrival, Vitaly proposed to Yana and they began preparing for their upcoming wedding. The October weather was not favorable for such a significant event as a wedding. Vitaly and Yana came early one weekend morning to Nikodim Petrovich, the village elder, for advice. "Come in, dear guests." A rather elderly man invited them into his office, immediately guessing the purpose of the young couple's visit. "So, you've decided to start a family too. And how did you guess?" Yana asked, squinting slyly. "Just look at your happy faces. Anyone in my place could have guessed. Besides, I've been watching your relationship develop for a long time. I'm happy for Yana, and I'm also very pleased that Vitaly has finally returned home. You are already the third couple I have who are planning to get married, but everyone doesn't want to do it during the rainy season, so I'm booking it for early November, a boy. There will already be snow, severe frosts are not expected, so none of the guests will freeze while walking from my apartment to the club where we plan to celebrate such an important event. Moreover, a construction crew will arrive tomorrow, tasked with renovating the building and improving the interior for. The district authorities promised to send a specialist to repair the movie projector, and we'll be showing movies twice a week." Yana left the mayor Vitaly inspired. Finally, the wedding date is known. Now all that remains is to buy a wedding dress and a good groom a suit. But that won't be the case. I earned a decent amount of money up north and spent practically nothing, and I sold my property before leaving, so I have the money. I don't want to buy a fancy dress to wear for just 2 days. Let's choose something smart but not flashy, something we can show off on other occasions. After all, this is the second time you and I will be participating in such an event. Well, your wish is my command. Now we'll pick up Yulia. She also needs to look presentable, and we'll go into town to do some shopping. They popped home, evenly ordered a taxi, and by midday they were shopping in the district center. They decided to have lunch and then go to the cinema. They returned home satisfied and happy. Yulia especially enjoyed the trip as she had seen little of the boarding school. But here, in a short period of time, she had gained a wealth of impressions. The relationship between Yana and Vitaly's daughter had developed a very trusting one. The girl fell in love with her and even accidentally called her by her name several times. Mom, which Vitaly, not to mention Yana herself, was very happy about. Vi decided to get a job as an electrician in the village. The lighting had been neglected to the point of collapse, and he had several qualifications under his belt and was a professional with transformers and other electrical components. When renovations began at the club, Vitaly approached Nikodim Petrovich with his proposals for repairing the lighting. The village headman took his suggestions very seriously. "Oh, this has been a long-standing headache for me. For 10 years now, I've been asking the district authorities to send a specialist who knows all the ins and outs. But no one wants to come into our darkness. 2 years ago, they sent a new transformer, but it's still gathering dust in the Wershfoam because no one knows how to connect it. And the old one is about to give up the ghost. Well, we also need to buy new lamps to properly illuminate the streets, preferably special ones that won't burn out. So I don't understand anything about this. Let's do it this way. As of today, you're officially an electrician. I'll draw up the order and stamp it. Here are the keys. Go to Petrovich's warehouse. He'll show you where the new transformer is. They've brought in a lot of electrical stuff there, but no one understands it. Yes, you'll have your own workshop. It's next to the warehouse. All you need to do is light the stove and work as much as you need. You'll even have your own scooter with a body, so you can drive around all the poles and check the wiring." Vitaly returned home elated, because now he could get down to business. Over the course of a week, he checked the condition of the village's electrical wiring, opened the boxes sent from the district center, and was satisfied. The conversion could begin. First, he inspected the old transformers which needed replacing urgently, but he couldn't handle it alone. The village head assigned several workers to help him. They brought in the new unit, then removed the old one and installed the new one in its place, and Vitali quickly connected it up. New wires he found in the warehouse. After unloading the transformer into the workshop, Vitali dismissed the workers, loaded the necessary equipment, and began methodically visiting all the power poles, climbing to the very top using crampons. By evening, the new lamps in special protective shades illuminated the entire village, greatly surprising the locals. A tired Vitali stopped by the club and warned the foreman that he would be replacing the wiring early in the morning so the work inside would begin a little later. The next evening, the village head and the new electrician went around the village, finding out who urgently needed to have their wiring replaced. Vitali paid special attention to connecting houses to the main grid. Incorrectly selected wires could cause short circuits which could damage individual wiring. Along the way, he compiled a list of what needed to be purchased. Nikon Petrovich promised to allocate funds from the general budget for the purchases, but residents were also expected to contribute as much as they could if they wanted to install energy-saving lamps. Within 2 weeks, the village's appearance was much improved. The city had improved. The central street and several side streets were brightly lit, and to avoid wasting electricity, the new electrician installed a starting relay that adjusted the brightness of the lamps based on the natural light. Nikodem Petrovich couldn't be happier with Vitali's work, and even promised to give him a bonus. Vitali and Diana, at a family meeting, decided to live in Nadezhda Vasilievna's house, and when the weather turned dry, to begin building a large modern cottage on the site of the old hut where Yana's grandmother had once lived. The dilapidated structure needed to be torn down immediately before it collapsed. Vitali went into town and bought a modem to ensure a stable internet connection. He had acquired a powerful laptop back in the far north, and now in the evenings he searched the internet for a good plan for a country house where they could live happily ever after. 3 weddings were celebrated at the village club, which now looked dignified not only inside but also outside. After finishing dancing, Yana stepped out into the small foyer to take a break. Vitali followed right behind her, leading his young wife to the window and pointing to a lone figure hovering in front of the club's porch. "Look, some hesitant man has come to congratulate one of the newlyweds, but he still hasn't brought himself to go inside." Looking closer, Yana recognized Leonid, who had changed quite a bit since she last saw him. Throwing a warm sheepskin coat over her shoulders, the young woman stepped out onto the porch to settle matters once and for all. "Why did you come? No one is waiting for you here. I got married and I don't want you in my life anymore." "Wait, I came to apologize. I'm in trouble. My mother is in the hospital with a stroke, and Larissa took all the money from the sale of her new apartment and left for parts unknown. You forged your own happiness. What does this have to do with me? You've erased me from your life. So what request could you possibly have of me? I'm not going to save you. Try not to show up in this village again." Leonid, with a cry of despair and rage, wanted to throw himself at the young happy woman who had rejected him, but Vitali blocked his path. After giving the man a few resounding slaps, he pushed him down the low porch and advised him to hurry to the bus stop, because the bus was leaving in a few minutes and there wouldn't be another one until the next day. Leonid walked slowly to the bus stop, his head bowed, realizing he was an extra at the celebration of life. And he and his mother were to blame for this, for her intrigues had meant to make things better, but everything turned out the opposite. On a fine summer day, in the garden behind the brand-new cottage which stood out among the older houses in the village, I sat in the gazebo Vitali had built with his own hands. The young mother was rocking their firstborn, a sturdy boy, Butus, who couldn't sleep. Meanwhile, the grown-up Yulia and her father were setting the table on the veranda waiting for Nikodem Petrovich. The village headman had become little Mikhail's godfather, and today they had decided to have lunch together to celebrate the housewarming in a small circle. The house was completely built, with only minor finishing work remaining on the second floor, but Vitali promised to finish everything within 30 days. Yana lovingly watched the grown-up Yulia, who was getting ready to start school this year. Happiness overflowed her heart. She looked at the clear blue sky and whispered, "Thank you, Nadezhda, for everything you've done for Mikus, for me." A happy life lay ahead for the close-knit family, in where there was no room for sorrows and hardships. And so our story ends. Dear friends, we really need your support so that our cozy home of audio stories can grow and develop. Please like and share. Subscribe. Your likes are like a quiet knock on our door, a sign that our story has resonated with you. And a subscription is the key that will always open the door to new encounters. Your honest feedback is incredibly important to us. So today, we'd like to ask you to share your life experiences in the comments. Tell us how you cope with difficult moments when the ground slips out from under your feet, and how you find the strength to overcome such situations. Your experience can be a true support for someone else. We thank each of you from the bottom of our hearts for your warmth, attention, and for staying with us. This text was read by Vitaly, especially for the Dom Рассказов channel. Thank you for being with us today.